Well, coming up on today's show, Sandy Munro takes another look at the Tesla Model 3. Hybrid and electric cars are doing well for Kia here in Europe. And how do you feed 7,000 Gigafactory workers? I'll tell you at the end of the podcast. Well, good morning, good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to EV News Daily. It's Friday the 19th of October 2018. It's Martyn Lee here, and I've been through every EV story today that I could find, so you don't have to. If you're looking at buying or selling a used EV in North America, check out myev.com. It's a wonderful marketplace that's totally free for you to use, and it's custom built as well, so no mucking about on those other buying and selling websites that aren't designed for electric cars. Check out myev.com for something purpose-built. We'll start with Toyota, and Toyota's just announced it's launching a division of 200 people whose sole responsibility is going to be to develop emission-free vehicles. They've named it the Toyota ZEV Factory, about developing the parts, the preparation, the production required for zero-emission vehicles. The website The Mainchini says that this new division is based on Toyota's old EV business planning team that was launched back in December 2016 and directly headed by Toyota's President Akio Toyoda. With 50 workers responsible for EV development, the team in November 2017 then became a unit of an in-house Toyota company that took charge of their advanced technology development, and now 200 people have been put into this new division to drive forward zero-emission vehicles. Well, I'd add a couple of comments to that. Firstly, that Toyota's version of zero-emission vehicles does include, very strongly, fuel cell cars. They are putting a lot of money and investment into their fuel cells, the Mirai, and I've got a really optimistic future about hydrogen and the energy density, and particularly when you compare that to the weight. There's many applications like aircraft, flight, things like even industrial uses, energy storage, ships, commercial vehicles, trucks, all good stuff. For moving people around in cars, it's terrible for so many reasons. I think top of my list is that I want EVs to be a way that we get away from the current model of us having to take our car to a filling station and for large oil companies to have us under the thumb, where they've had for the last 100 years control of us, and they set the prices, and whether the oil price goes up or whether it goes down, or whether OPEC decide to increase production or decrease production or lower the price or hold countries to ransom, or wars being broken out all around the world and terrible suffering all about oil. I'm looking forward to getting away from that and plugging your car in at home, and you get up every morning and it's full, right? That's the best feeling ever. You just get up and my car is just full. So that old model of going somewhere to fill up, I hate. For personal transport, EVs provide the opportunity, and the oil industry will fight tooth and nail to maintain us under their control and having hydrogen filling stations. So that's like the main reason. There's so many more technical reasons why hydrogen's a terrible idea for cars. The other thing, of course, is that nobody quite knows where Toyota are with plug-in cars. Here in the UK, at least, they have this really extensive advertising campaign that's very anti-EVs. They have their hybrids, which are great cars, but they are just a stepping stone, really. Just a way of getting another few gas miles out of cars. I mean, they're good now, and actually the latest Prius is a lovely, well-put-together car. A lot of people buy them and then don't realise that they're not getting as much EV as they want. Other people buy them and they're absolutely delighted. Lots of taxis use the Prius, which is a very well put together car. And my problem with that campaign is that they've featured things like in their TV ads. There's a YouTube ad that I shared once, and it features a rapid charger all covered in cobwebs, insinuating that no one's used it for years. And then this kind of Toyota Yaris or something hybrid drives past it with a smug looking driver. And there's my problem with Toyota is that you can say, and by all means advertise your products and say, look, we think hybrids are just right for us, our business model, that's where our technology was. We were first in the market with hybrids. Just say, look, we make great cars. How about you buy one? What I really hate about it is they've gone one step further. They're like, we make great cars. Why don't you buy one? And if you plug your car in, you're a bloody idiot. And they've gone out of their way to really offend everyone in the EV community. So I know so many people who now say, actually, kind of if Toyota had come out with a good EV, I would have bought one. And so many people now say, I don't care what they do. They just spent years attacking me and for my decision. If Toyota now turn around and go, hey, we're making plug-in cars, it'll be like, great, you just spent years telling us I was a moron for plugging in. So that's a lot of people's problem with that. And, of course, they make the Prius Prime, which is an inconvenient truth. We will see where that ends up, but, I mean, a press release saying that you're assembling a team to start looking at it does seem like you're probably 10 or 15 years behind what should have been going on. Do you know what I mean? So there's some immensely clever people working at Toyota, and they're such a huge and influential company that if they set their mind to it and their budgets and their R&D, I've no doubt they'll make great cars, but what cars they'll be, well, we'll just have to wait and see. But Toyota, play nicely. If I choose to plug in, well, that's my decision. Don't insult me for doing that. Right, Sandy Munro is back on the case of the Model 3. Well, this is a weird old soap opera. Let me talk you through it. There's been this weird kind of series of videos coming out. Sandy Munro and his company take apart cars down to the final nut and bolt, and they price them all up, they make a report, they sell them to other car makers, so that other car makers haven't got to do it themselves, but they can know that what their competition are making and how much it's costing them and what their margins are. First of all, he made a YouTube video hating the Model 3, really hated everything about it. Then, on Autoline, he released his driving impressions and was coming around. Then on Autoline After Hours, he started to rave about things like the electronics. And then in a final video, he said, "I have to eat crow." That was his quote. He was like completely wrong about the Model 3, astonished at it, the opportunity to have a 30% margin for profit, the battery and the electronics just years ahead of anybody else. He was such a fanboy of it, being like, you know what, I got it completely wrong. I've now taken the car apart. He was making first impressions before. He said, we've now got down to the final nut and bolt. We've taken the whole thing apart. Deeply impressed. Incredible. Loved it, right? Then the weirdness started. I tuned in to watch him on an Autoline episode where he was going to be a guest, and he didn't show up. And the host said it's because of legal action. He was being sued, and he was no longer able to talk about the work that he was doing, taking apart the Model 3. No more details given. But given he tears apart the Model 3s for, I'm imagining, Tesla's competitors / people who don't want it to be a success, the oil industry, things like that, I'm not surprised that they wouldn't have been very happy with his sudden public proclamations of love for Tesla and admiration and praise. So I presume that legal action would go on for months and years, and that it would end how it ends. None of my business, not getting involved in that. I don't know what agreements he had or hadn't signed to say that he would or wouldn't talk on YouTube about his findings if they're paying lots of money for a report and he's making videos about it. Anyway, then today a weird thing surfaced. It was, once again, weirdly, him going back to the very beginning, his original line of being very heavily critical over Tesla. In fact, he says that he's found 227 ways that Tesla are doing it wrong, and that they are very naive. It's almost as if they've never built a car before, that they're years behind other car makers, they're making mistakes no other car maker would make, and that it's so bad that he was forced to send Tesla his report of 227 things that should be better. Now, look, I'm not saying Tesla can't make their cars in a better way. I think that the Model 3s being made now are better than 6 months ago and better than a year ago. That's, they don't have model years at Tesla. They just constantly improve. One of the things that's great about them. But what's weird about his sudden change of heart? Are Tesla years ahead? Or are they years behind? Which one? It can't be both. So that's something weird. You know in your gut when something just tells you something isn't right, something doesn't ring true. This doesn't seem right. His sudden turn on Tesla and saying all of these critical things like the car is massively over-engineered. Yeah, but the car just aced its crash tests, so much so that if you put your family in a Tesla, they are safer than any other car. Well, okay, that's a good thing. And now he's come out criticising the over-engineered nature of it, saying, but they're wasting money, they can cut costs, cut materials, make more money. I'm quite happy, by the way, driving a very safe car. I would rather the companies weren't making an extra dime by taking out some rivets and some metal. Thank you very much. And also, he was critical of the battery packaging, and of course, that shows some naivety because, the Model S and the Model X battery is packaged very differently to the Model 3. It needs more of a structural rigidity from the car itself rather than the pack being as structurally sound. It's just weird, right? So we'll see where this ends up, and it's just one of those things that it's strange how 1 minute you're a massive fan and then you're not. I mean, the one thing that I guess, you can't argue with is that whoever he upset enough to be sued, if that story was true, and at least be threatened with legal action, those people, whether that was the German car makers, whether it's the oil industry that didn't like him being pro-Tesla, well, those people will certainly be delighted about his new stance. Moving on, Audi's first all-electric vehicle, the e-tron SUV, is going to cost £70,805 here in the UK. It's due to go on sale early next year. Interested buyers can put down a £1,000 deposit to get priority access, says Auto Express today. They particularly at Auto Express love the charging setup. I do as well. On the driver's side, there's a flap that folds down. It's kind of it's electrified, and it's kind of a little mechanical flap that folds itself down. It's real theatre. Underneath there is your DC fast charging. 150 kilowatts, 80% charge in less than half hour, right? On the other side, though, of the car is another charging socket, AC only. That's, I guess, if your house is, you have to park it in a certain way, you pull into a car park and the charger lead isn't long enough, there's two sockets each side. Brilliant idea. I'll put a full link to the Auto Express article in the show notes. Well, Mitsubishi and GAC are jointly kicking off their production of their first electric SUV in the Chinese town of Changsha. The Yufim EV is an SUV with a range of 410 kilometres, according to the industry newsletter Electrive. The pure electric SUV starts at, and get this, $20,000. That's about 17,000 euros when you factor in the Chinese subsidies. The Yufim EV will initially be offered in 12 Chinese cities. But what about when it's offered in cities outside China? I'm not saying that this particular model is, but if they're going to make a car that cheap, how will the more premium names market themselves against a very cheap EV? The quality coming out of China is very good now. Made in China is no longer a swear word or a label that you have to be ashamed of. Made in China actually is fine now. Most people don't care where their cars, their phones, their laptops are made. So we'll see where that goes. And it could just be that we start talking more about these cheaper Chinese EVs if they start selling them in Western markets and what kind of interest people have in them. Well, here in Europe, Kia Motors have recorded its best ever year-to-date sales to the end of September, aided by growing sales of its expanding hybrid and pure EV lineup. Much of Kia's growth in 2018 has come from a 42.5% increase in sales of the brand's expanding hybrid and EV range. Sales of the Niro hybrid and the plug-in hybrid have increased by 38% and 34,000 units year-to-date. The pure electric Soul EV is having a best ever year, with 5,000 units sold. That's up 30%. Kia's sold 43,000 electrified, so that's hybrid or plug-in or pure EV cars so far this year. I'll put a link to the press centre in the show notes. What about if you have a car that you're very fond of, or a car that isn't past its working life, but for one reason or another, either emissions regulations or your own conscience, you want to get rid of the dirty tailpipe sticking out the back of it? Well, Bosch have a new solution with their e-axle, and it's a plug-and-play system, really. You pull out the fossil and you put in an electric drivetrain. And whilst EVs that come from EV factories are a thing of the present, Bosch is trying to answer the question of what do you do in the future? What if we could find a solution, they say, to retrofit internal fossil engines with electric powertrains? And what if we could do all of that where it bolts in exactly where the fossil fits? Well, according to NDTV, they say, we had Bosch's new e-axle on the test track all to ourselves all afternoon, and after I acquainted myself with the electric car, I must say I'm rather impressed, firstly by the fact that the conversion like this didn't feel like it was done in a hurry. It was engineered correctly, and it could actually work in the mass market as a mobility solution too. And secondly, I love EVs with instant torque and fast acceleration. It's an interesting question, isn't it? Bosch developing their e-axle for cars that is a retro fit. I wonder if people will go for that, or whether they'll just hold on to their fossil for another couple of years until they can get the EV that they really want. And maybe you need to think about those different markets as well. Markets like, say, India, where perhaps they're not going to be full of brand new cars, but also you don't want to run your car on fossil fuels for the next 10 or 15 years, but you can put an electric powertrain in, run your car off your solar panels on the roof, and all of a sudden, you've leapfrogged a whole bunch of technology. Elon Musk talks about it a lot as well, actually. He talks about how he doesn't, the way he sees it in countries like Africa, for instance, they never had landlines. So they didn't have the telephone. And then because of cell phone technology, they had cell phones because they could put the masts up at a good cost. So they skipped out the whole bit of just connecting every telephone by a wire. And he says, actually, everyone's a doom-monger about, but what about when there's all of our old fossil cars in Europe and America get shipped off for a second life in Africa and India and countries where they want to buy cheaper cars? And he says, actually, will that happen? Or will they just skip that phase and move straight to EVs and solar and wind and be ultimately responsible for their own mobility with renewable energy generation themselves and then going into an EV? That's an interesting question. Well, a couple more stories to go. The black cab here in London is an iconic shape and sight on London streets, but the LEVC, that's the company that makes it, owned by Geely, yes, them of Volvo fame. The TXE City is the world's most advanced electric taxi, and it's now been approved by Parisian authorities. Ah, oui, bonjour, ma petit fromage. See, I am bilingual. It's legally going to be able to be used as a working taxi in Paris. The news comes months ahead of the vehicle's launch in the city, and the Paris launch is tabled for the first half of next year, with the launch date to be confirmed once negotiations are done. It means that Paris joins Amsterdam, Berlin, Hamburg and Oslo in seeing the London black cab, the electric taxi, on its streets. And finally, how do you feed 7,000 gigafactory workers? I thought this was a really cute story to end with. I mean, you've got to be a pretty hardcore EV fan to try and hunt this story down, but I did find it for you on today's podcast, and it came from a Reno Gazette journal. How do you feed 7,000 employees of the Gigafactory at Tesla? Well, the company cafeteria is making a comeback, but with a difference and a new economy spin. It's helping local food and drink vendors in the area to set up shop and feed the employees of Tesla. Because the Gigafactory is in such a remote location, you can't really just pop out for a sandwich. So the food has to come to the staff. Well, a single food truck was feeding the Gigafactory back in 2016, but today it's grown to 20 food trucks all in a row, 12 to 15 on an average day. There's 9 markets run by Rounds Bakery of Reno, an outpost of Roundabout Catering of Sparks, cafes from Sakana Sushi and Bangkok Cuisine of Reno, and a main cafeteria that now stretches to 19,000 square feet. Well, to make it easier for local food and drink outlets to serve the employees, Tesla doesn't charge them for spaces in the parking lot for their trucks. The company supplies utilities and the basic build-out equipment. The concessionaires, in return, supply the product, the food and drink, and the labour, and don't share any revenue with Tesla. So that's how they get round it, bringing back the good old-fashioned cafeteria in a new economy style. That was a really nice little story to end on. How do you feed 7,000 Gigafactory workers? Well, thank you very much to everyone that's responded to this week's question of the week, and you've got a couple more days to get it in. We're asking you about batteries this week. Let me know your thoughts. There seems to be a bit of a pattern developing, companies either putting in big batteries that maybe aren't as efficient, but they just kind of get the job done with a really big headline number, like we've got the big battery, and that gives you the range. Or other companies have really good efficiency for some reason, like the Hyundai Ioniq, tiny battery, but gets you a long way for what it's got, but maybe you stop more often to charge. What would you rather now? Is it the big battery, or would you prefer the more efficient battery? Let me know online, YouTube comments, Facebook comments. The blog is EV News Daily, and if you want, you can email me, hello@evnewsdaily.com. Thank you to the 103 patrons of the podcast, and if that interests you and you're curious about Patreon, the link is patreon.com/evnewsdaily. That's where people who listen to a podcast every day or enjoy any kind of creative work, like singers, songwriters, artists, poets, can support people in their work and offer a small contribution to help produce that work. And thank you to everybody who is, and if you would, I invite you to look at the page if it's something that you would consider. There are 269 previous episodes online. They are all for free, wherever you get your podcasts from, and you can join me on the socials, searching for EV News Daily. A very special Saturday special programme tomorrow with two big names in the EV charging industry, and it's going to be I've recorded it already because they are in their West Coast, US, so it's in the can. I'm now editing it, and I'm learning a lot, and I think you're going to learn a lot and have a lot of fun when you listen to that on Saturday for this week's Saturday special. We take a deep dive into the future of charging. Really fascinating. I'm really pleased to get these people on the podcast as well. Two very, very busy people. Thank you very much for listening today. Do have a wonderful day. I'll catch you tomorrow.